friends, Kris here. You want to learn a little bit more as we continue our theme on casting our care on Him? Now today I want to talk about legitimate cares, because if a doctor says to you, this is serious, or a parent, pastor, teacher, whoever, you'd better get concerned. You know, we're talking about I don't care anymore, but that doesn't give us a license to be reckless with our lives. You know, some things are important. If a person says, hey, that's the least of my cares, well, that implies that there are some cares that are weightier than others. When Saul in the Old Testament, his dad said, I want you to go and find those donkeys that got loose. And in 1 Samuel 9 and verse 8, they searched and hunted all day. And then Saul said to his servant, come, let us return, lest my father cease caring about the donkeys and start to become worried about us. In other words, a lost son is a whole lot bigger deal than a lost donkey. Legitimate cares. Paul in 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 13 said, I had no rest in my spirit. He cared because I found not Titus my brother. He was concerned that Titus was lost somewhere. So there are legitimate cares, and here's an important one. Are you saved? Well, if you're not, if you want to worry, that's something to worry about. 4 or 5 points today. Number one, what may not be a big deal to you may be a very big deal to God. Somebody says about their sins, oh, it's just a little sin. What's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal with God. James 2 and verse 10, if you keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, even if it's a little point, he is guilty of all. Somebody says, well, I said a vow, but I really didn't mean it. Listen to Ecclesiastes 5 and 6. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin, neither say thou before the angel, it was an error. Oh, just an error. I really didn't mean that. What's the big deal? Well, it's a big deal with God. Second, there is a difference between being carefree and being careless. God would have us to be free of care, but He doesn't want us to be apathetic and unconcerned and careless in our life. You know, Amos 6 and verse 1, woe to them that are at ease in Zion. That means those that don't care. Isaiah 32 and verse 9, rise up, you women that are at ease, hear my voice, you careless daughters. Careless. See, the balancing act is between being apoplectic, caring too much, and apathetic, caring too little. You know, one teacher was fed up with his class, and he just took his chalk on the chalkboard and wrote ignorance, and then wrote apathy. And one of the boys looked back at his friend who had his feet up on the desk and said, what's he mean by that? And he said, I don't know, and I don't care. Listen to Zechariah 7 and 11. It says they refused to heed, shrugged their shoulders, and stopped their ears that they would not hear. You know, a lot of people just shrug their shoulders. What's the big deal? It's a big deal with God. Number 3, Paul complimented carefulness. In 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 11, I'm going to the dentist in just a few minutes. I'd kind of like to have a dentist who cares, a dentist who is careful. If you go to a surgeon, if you go to a mechanic, you don't want somebody that says, I don't care anymore. You want somebody that takes some things seriously. And Jesus said to Martha, you know, Martha was making a big deal about her meal. Luke 10 and verse 41, Martha, Martha, you are careful and troubled about many things. Now listen, Jesus was not rebuking her. He was just letting her know that right now there are some things that are bigger cares than others. You're working, your sister is worshiping, right now it's time to worship. Okay? And the test is in balancing vital care with things that don't care so much. Then number 4, when the word says beware, you'd better be aware and you'd better take care. You know, 28 times the Bible says beware, 128 times it says take heed. I like 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 12. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. And the biggest care is the care of a person's soul. In Psalm 142, David said, no man cared for my soul. Do you care for people? And then finally, number 5, legitimate cares, like any care, are to be cast on the Lord. 1 Peter 5 and verse 7, casting all your care on Him, all your care, legitimate cares, needless cares, casting all your care on Him, for He cares for you. So, tune in tomorrow. We're going to talk more on this theme, I don't care anymore, and we're learning to balance proper care with improper care. If you like, share it with a friend. We'll see you tomorrow on Through the Prism of Chrism.